Just for them to make sure.
Because the system is actually gone for gone.
So then, well, let's open up. We'll start essentially that's your essence.
How are you, man? You're good? The single window.
Finally.
Well, I just need you to do me one more favor.
Yeah. Yes. I'm at a meeting right now. Sure. Yes, no problem. Okay.
All right. Good morning. It's morning. Yes, it's still morning. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you for your patience. My name is Ben Emmanuel, Cabinet Secretary. We are now officially commencing the meeting. Of course, at the head table with us today at the command center is Honorable Alan Shastney, our Prime Minister, along with the Director of NEMO, the Director of MET, and we also have officials from the Department of Health, the CMO Public Permanent Secretary in the Ministry of Commerce, senior officials, and the Chief Education Officer from the Ministry of Education, and a number of other senior officials. We know that we have joining us virtually representatives from all of the key agencies, departments of government. So we will now commence the meeting officially. We will invite Mr. Kudra to do a prayer as we commence our meeting, and then following this, we would be having comments and remarks from the Director of NEMO. Then the Prime Minister is going to give some brief comments, and we'll have the main presentation that will be done by the Director of Met Services as it relates to an update and projections on the storm, and we'll receive reports thereafter from the key agencies, and we will follow from there to decide what decisions will be made by way of our national response and our preparedness. So with this, let me invite Mr. Kodra to just do the prayer, and then we'll proceed with the Director of Met thereafter. Director of NEMO, sorry.
Let us pray. Lord, you have watched over us. You are the shade at our right hand. The sun will not harm us by day, nor the moon by night. You will keep us from all harm. You will watch over our lives. You will watch over our coming in and our going out, both now and forever. Father, indeed, this is the day that you have made, Lord. We declare that we will rejoice and we will be glad in it, Almighty God. We thank you for your wonderful grace and mercy. Lord, as we prepare for Tropical Storm Elsa, Lord, we pray for wisdom for all of our decision makers as we look to prepare our country, prepare our nation, our people, that, Lord, everyone will be safe during this storm. Again, Lord, we ask that you take full control of our deliberations, and everything that is done will be done to your honor and to your glory. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen. Amen.
Greetings, everyone, and I wish to thank you for coming out on such notice to this pre-strike meeting. allow me to recognize the presence of the Honorable Prime Minister, Alan Chasney, other ministers of government, the Honorable Philip J. Pierre, Opposition leader, the Cabinet Secretary, Mr. Benjamin Emmanuel, Permanent Secretaries, the Commissioner of Police, the Chief Fire Officer, members of the Diplomatic Corps. Equally so, I wish to recognize the members of the NEMO management team, members of the various disaster committees and national committees, and stakeholders. Good morning and a warm welcome to this NEMAC pre-strike meeting. Ladies and gentlemen, regrettably, we are experiencing a dual hazard environment at this current moment. We are now being threatened by Tropical Storm Elsa, and we are still facing our pandemic. With this regard, I wish for us to use our collective efforts and do our best to brainstorm and guide St. Lucians through this particular threat. We now need to look at our infrastructure and what is ready, what needs to be adjusted, and our level of communication to the general public to not create panic in this regard. Let us ensure that whatever we do today, the outcome is for the greater good in securing lives and livelihoods of our citizens. I wish to acknowledge that our critical regional partners have reached out to us and are willing to support us, such as USAID, BHA, and CDMA. So this morning, the discussion should be guided as to the updates that will be provided by all agencies, the concerns raised, and the way by which we are going to respond if we are severely impacted. If we are not impacted, let us have contingency plans to ensure that the general public are advised as to the precautionary measures that are to be taken to stay safe. With this, I will now yield to the Honorable Prime Minister, who will now take over the meeting. Thank you.
Good morning, everyone, and with the acknowledgement of everyone, I adopt the protocol that was established. I've been briefed on the current situation, and I'm very satisfied that NEMO is moving in the right direction. There's some critical decisions that we need to discuss today. I think one is to do with school for tomorrow. And also, I think following on that, while I think government would be in a position to make the decision about school, there is the business community, and we would certainly like to hear back from the business community because there were a couple of options that we have. We can either take a preemptive position today, or we can in fact wait until tomorrow and make a decision later in the day. The good news and that we're hearing is that the system is moving very fast, which ought to augur well for us, meaning that as it comes in, it might go out just as quickly and would minimize the level of potential damage. But as we've learned in the past, these storms have minds of their own. There's nothing that would prevent it from slowing down and staying over our space longer. So again, I think that that's a discussion that we can have and a decision that we would make. But those are really the two most critical decisions I think that we have to make. One is whether in fact we allow school to operate tomorrow. I think the general feeling is for the safety of everyone that maybe we should close school for tomorrow. We could make that decision known today. And then secondly, Brian, I know that you're on to get some impact from you in terms of how the business community would like to proceed, whether we would want to take a preemptive decision now, or whether in fact we know that there's a possibility that it could get worse and therefore wait for the morning, which means that persons would go to work in the morning and it may be cut short at any time depending on the strength of the storm. But that's a decision we would want to make collectively. Maybe, I don't know if we get a presentation from the Met office, so that before we conclude that we're all speaking from the same hymn. But again, I want to thank you, Madam Director, for your swiftness. I also want to acknowledge that SEDEMA has been in contact with me, and as you indicated, everyone is standing by if in fact the storm gets worse than expected. But at this point, I'll hand over to the Met Office.
Yeah, thank you, Prime Minister. I would also like to adopt the protocol already established, and we'll go straight into the presentation. Yeah, you have to share screen. Where is it? Yeah, just 1 second.
Changes to the protocols for COVID during this period.
Say to join.
While the Met Office presentation is getting ready, I just discussed with the Cabinet Secretary just so that we can allay any fears. As indicated, we have two crises that we're handling at the same time, which is the COVID. We're not expecting at this time to make any changes to the current protocols, meaning the curfews would remain the same and everything else that we currently are practicing would remain the same. So it would certainly just be from a business and safety perspective from the storm itself that would potentially cause any changes in the current behavior of our country.
Yes, thank you, sir, again. So we have Tropical Storm Elsa at our doorsteps, and I'll just brief you on what is happening. Low pressure. Okay, it's in an environment. South of it, there's also a disturbance that we will eventually have to keep an eye on. So, coming out of the intertropical convergence zone, we seem to be having a lot of activity this time around. Okay, the satellite photo shows the extent of the system. It's about 200 miles in diameter, and the red circle is the island chain. So St. Lucia is in the center of it. So it's a relatively small system and moving rather quickly. So this is the projected path, the red line, and the yellow is the cone of uncertainty. So this is the general idea that, general direction that the system would travel. These are model projections. So you actually have the bulk of the model predictions passing south of St. Lucia. So that's both good and bad. Yeah, so normally a system has its more severe weather in the northeast quadrant. I would like to remind persons of Dorian. Dorian actually passed directly over St. Lucia, but most of the weather was over Martinique, so they got impacted. So, but like PM said, each system is unique in their character, right? This is a projection of the possible intensity of this system. So in the next 24 to 36 hours, we would still be a tropical storm. Later on, it might increase. So this is a projection of the storm force winds. So the purple and reds are what is the stronger winds, and the outskirts would still give you 30 knots, 50 knots, 50 knots, 50 knots. Projection of what is expected. So these are actually the winds and the seas. So you'll be whipping up the oceans, because we have to think not only of landfall, but also what is happening on the seas. So if the system passes over at 30 to 35 knots, then you would get seas of 6 to 9 feet, which is rough seas. So the projections would not allow seacraft to traverse. Okay, the intermediate advisory at 11 a.m. The location of ELSA was at 10.1 degrees north and 51.4 degrees west, which is about 680 miles east of St. Lucia, or east-southeast. And the maximum sustained winds was 45 miles per hour. That was an increase from 35 earlier. Okay, and it's moving westward. So if it stays on that track, then it would definitely pass south of St. Lucia. Okay, and for watches and warnings, the islands that put out storm warnings, which is a storm warning is when winds would be impacting the island within 36 hours. Those islands are Barbados, Martinique, St. Lucia, and St. Vincent. And further out, you'd have Guadeloupe and Grenada and the Grenadines having watches, because they don't they won't have the serious impact that we might have. Okay. So for the winds, we expecting storm force winds on Friday, and one of the issues that will be compounded is the rainfall. We already had a system which passed through on Wednesday with significant rainfall, and if this system affects us with the rainfall that is expected, we would have about 3 to 6 inches, which would definitely cause some concern and flooding in the area. Yes, thank you.
Mr. Joy, Prime Minister, perhaps we can just allow for any queries, clarification in respect of the presentation by Met, so that we just have a clear understanding of what that is, because that will set the premise on which decisions will be made in terms of what will be the national response. So, of course, we would want to just open up if there are any queries or any clarification or any information required from the Met office, from the Director of Met. If there is any such input, we can take it at this time before we invite reports and presentation and updates from some of the key agencies.
Mr. Chairman?
Yes, we recognize you, Honorable Philip JPL, Leader of the Opposition.
Thank you very much for doing that. Good morning to everyone. Good morning to Mr. Joye.
Good morning.
Mr. Joye said that the storm may pass through a little earlier than 8 a.m. tomorrow morning. I know it's not, he hasn't got any definite response, but how earlier is it? Do you think it's much earlier? How earlier do you think, based on your preliminary calculations?
Right now it's moving at 28 miles per hour, and I do not think it would be much earlier than the 8 a.m.
Morning. All right.
So we're looking at maybe 6 a.m.
Fine.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you, Honorable Pierre. Are there any other inputs at this time before we move to reports and brief from the various agencies, key stakeholder agencies?
Yes, a question to Mr. Joaillier. Mr. Joaillier, are there any chances of any form of rapid intensification from the system? Because the ship's program indicated this morning that there will be the possibility of 28% intensification. And they also stated that the Thames lightning seen around the center of the storm, that's also an indication that there could be a possibility of rapid intensification. Do you have any knowledge of that happening?
Well, with the speed of the system, I do not think that would be conducive for rapid intensification. If it was moving a little slower, then there would be that chance of rapid intensification.
At this point in time, what strength of the winds do you expect to hit St. Lucia?
Presently, it's about 45 miles per hour, or 40. Let me just double check. So we can safely say about 40, given the present track. Yeah, it's 45 knots.
Okay, thank you. I thank you very much for that intervention. At this stage, I think unless there is any other burning issue or clarification.
Mr. Chairman?
Yes, Mr. Luisi, you're recognized. You may proceed.
Thank you. If Mr. Joaillier could just go back to the slide and review the times, the one that showed the times we expect the system to hit. From my viewing, we were suggesting that 8 a.m. we would feel, between 6 and 8 a.m. we'll feel the full blast.
No, this is the arrival time. So that's when we
Arrival
will
time,
begin
okay.
to feel the tropical storm force winds.
And at what time will we, probably it'll be directly also feel the worst of it, whatever strength is that? It's at?
At 45 knots. Most likely by midday, 11 a.m. to midday.
11 a.m. to midday. And with these types of winds and the potential rain, what would be the advice in terms of people continuing their normal course of action?
Well, I think that's what the meeting here is for, to determine what we have to do.
Yeah, but
So
I know.
I will stick with the
Met.
Met.
Advice to help me. At 45 miles an hour,
Yeah.
it would therefore be highly risky to be out in the open.
Correct. But I
And
would
we were
rather stick
expecting at
with
that time
the Met, my area of expertise.
Okay. All right, I'll stick to the Met.
All right.
Yeah. And what kind of rainfall would we should maybe be experiencing at that time?
Well, it's between 3 to 6 inches, which is about 75 to, I think, 150 millimeters.
Okay. All right.
Thank you, Mr. Luisi. In fact, if I can do a quick recap, and I'm happy that you intervene and sought that clarification from Mr. Joaillier, but My capture of the the presentation by Mr. Joye indicates that St. Lucia is and will remain on the tropical storm warning, which means that in accordance with our national emergency protocols, once we are under a storm warning, we take the necessary actions or the necessary measures pursuant to our SOPs or national plan. And that includes an assessment of where we are throughout and a determination as to what would be the level of operations at all levels in the society. Secondly, the report is indicating that the impact strength of the storm between potentially the hours of 6 a.m. to midday is likely to be about 40 miles per hour during the period of impact on the island. And in terms of rainfall, projected to be 3 to 6 inches, and noting, as Mr. Joye has indicated, that this is coming on the heels of the tropical wave that we experienced over the last 24 hours, and therefore some level of saturation of the soil. That's essentially is the summing up of what I understand to be the MET assessment of where we are. And within that context, a decision now has to be made regarding the level of our operation, or perhaps the level of the level at which the various activities in the economy will be determined. On the basis of this, with that information, perhaps what we will do now is to invite the following agencies to provide some quick update essentially as to our level of preparedness or any issues that we would need to flag that would require addressing within the time that we have prior to the impact period of the storm. And I'd like to go in the following order. We will first hear from the Department of Infrastructure, followed by the Department of Agriculture, and the Department of Health. Thereafter, we will hear from, I will announce the order so that we don't get confused. So we will first hear from Infrastructure, the Department of Agriculture, the Department of Health, if there are any reports by way of just your level of preparedness, any issues that we would want to flag at this level of the NEMAC meeting, and then we'll announce the other agencies. Mr. Luisi, we will come to the private sector and the Chamber of Commerce in our second round, so just alerting that you would need to be prepared for this. So over now to Department of Infrastructure, followed by Agriculture, and then Health. Is Infrastructure on the line? Okay, so can we move to the Department of Agriculture? Infrastructure seemingly is either not on the line or having some difficulties. We'll come back to you.
Good morning, Cabinet Secretary, Baron Lucia, Department of Agriculture. Let me recognize the Honorable Prime Minister, ministers present, and other distinguished guests. By way of update, the department has had its meeting to prepare and review its procedures in terms of disaster preparedness. We have been in touch with our Chief Extension Officers, our 7 region heads. The island is divided into 7 regions or zones. These regions heads have given instructions to the Extension Officers. We have a method of pre-assessment, and that is taking place now on the ground in terms of crop production. That is taking place on the ground, and simultaneously the extension officers are providing information to the farmers as well. The procedure is the same for livestock. The Chief Veterinary Officer has informed the extension officer pre-assessments are being done, and the farmers are being advised as to untethered animals and animals grazing, or in free-range animals in low-lying and flood areas. So that is taking place as well today. Alerts have been sent to the cooperatives. The extension officers have been deployed to the various landing sites to ensure that the infrastructure gear boats are secured, speaking and informing the fishers as well. And of course, any post-disaster assessments will be done to inform of the level of damage to that infrastructure and equipment. In the main concept, we are continuing our efforts to inform our stakeholders and to prepare them for the impending storm. That is my update. Thank you.
Thank you, PS Agriculture, for this update. So we can move to the Department of Health. I don't know who's reporting for health.
Yes, ABS is on.
Okay, wonderful. PS Health, are you hearing us?
Yes, I am.
We are not hearing you. Double check that your audio is unmuted.
Come on next.
Okay, well, apparently we are having difficulty hearing health, so let's go back to infrastructure and allow health to correct and come back to us. I understand infrastructure is now back on the line.
Yes, Patrick, I am, my sincere apology. I think I was watching you and listening, but I didn't hear you. I was a little distracted there. I didn't hear you call my name or our name. Okay, I just want to recognize Prime Minister Michael Shastney. I think let me recognize Leader of the Opposition, Honorable Philip J. Pierre, Capsec yourself, Director of NEMO, Permanent Secretary, the members of NEMAC, special invited guests. Yes, thank you very much, Capsec, for all that. In terms of our level of preparedness, we have in place our disaster response plan. That is reviewed annually. It's reviewed at this stage. Our staff are actively discussing it, and we are quite ready to implement and execute it. As a matter of fact, given the status and the update from Met Services, we have already gone into high gear and getting our staff preparing our vehicles, all fuel and so on. So we are on high alert. In terms of our preparedness and what we have to do at the beginning of this year, such as the seating of our major forces, unclogging of culverts, and safeguarding of our bridge infrastructure, and caring of our drainage, and other matters pertaining to hazards. We have not gone full ahead with our desilting program yet. We just in the midst of doing this, but our desilting was done, I can say, relatively late last year, and even some were recently completed, and you can perhaps see the test that we would have gotten with the April rains. So we, as soon as possible, and we are, based on our new procurement legislation, we are now going to get our desilting program on the way. This, along with our Ketikos program, and the Ketikos program will certainly help us some of the vegetation and some of the drainage. So we're handling now a pre-hurricane program and our desilting program at this point. In terms of the risk areas, and you would have seen what transpired with the Badly, we have secured and shored up that area, and our staff have done several examination and inspection of the area. The current damaged site, as it is currently, we've tried to protect it. We've done a bit of drainage and getting the water away from that site as we proceed with our procurement and our design for the construction, which is pretty much, I think the construction is pretty much advanced. So we're going now into our procurement of a contractor or contractors to get it going first. But in the interim, quite apart from that, for that particular site, we've done a reconnaissance of the entire battery, from Wagon Poisson going up to the top, to the summit, and back down to Tomazo. Our staff have walked this, they mapped it out, we've already determined the risky areas, and where we have to do some early intervention, we've also done that as well. And then we will be certainly doing certain clearing of drainage and all of whatever we think that is. We have already also alerted our staff that even when the rains, we see any sign of rains, we will certainly be out there trying to ensure that areas are indeed cleared and that we can do some quick response. There are some areas around the island that we've been alerted to, that we've dispatched our staff to take a look at them, and where they require urgent intervention, we will also get that going. So, by way of summarizing it, we do have our plan in place. We've tested each year, and our staff are quite ready to get into action with some of our mitigation measures. And as soon as it is over, God forbid that nothing happens, or if it were to, we will immediately activate our disaster response center and to get into action. So I've said this by way of our update to NEMAC at this point. I wait any questions you may wish to go.
Thank you very much, PS Infrastructure. I want to go back to the Permanent Secretary and the Ministry of Health, followed by presentations from Education. We will take the Royal St. Lucia Police Force and then the Fire Service in that order, and then we'll be hearing from the private sector and other utility companies and stakeholders thereafter. So it will be health, education, the police, and the fire service.
Could I ask a question to infrastructure?
Yeah, yes, you may proceed.
Thank you very much. PS Infrastructure, with the issues surrounding the Badler, we understand that sometimes these occur because of the force of nature, but having experienced them, has the ministry put in place any measures or alternative measures that would allow people to move from the north to the south of the island, even if there is a problem? Meaning, what are we doing as our backup plan, as our continuity plan? As I seem to recall many years ago in another life, there were plans done and in place to help address and provide alternative approaches so the traveling public were not just told that the road is closed, but other measures that were considered. Is there anything that has been updated and ready to use?
From our agency, well, we try to maintain the road network as best as possible and even upgrade them. When we speak of the Badley, if you go further south, we always say that we have redundancy in the south. So you have alternatives. But when you get into Denmark, that ends. So which is why we do a conversation about north-south link road and so on. So within that corridor, it is difficult to establish a new route at this point. That is, again, strategically as a country, we're looking at it. But at this moment, what we have before us is indeed the West Coast Road, if the body in any way is correct. I'm not saying that the engineers can always a solution, but I think that solution requires some level of investment. So they can always find a way around, but again, at a tremendous cost. But when the experience at the bad level, I can recall that the road was closed, the road is closed, but persons were trying to determine, can I walk across? And that in itself was like, hey, we couldn't officially say that, but persons were doing it. And persons, the buses got to a point, and even persons didn't really care, they went past. So these are some of the things that we have to do, but we would hope not to have a closure like this and one that is very, that is lengthy. We would want that if God forbid something were to happen, that we can have it reinstated. What transpired, we tried to get the road reopened as quickly as possible. That's what the turnaround time we tried to ensure that it is shortened. But that's as best as I think we can do at this moment. But whenever something happens, we will certainly try to find an alternative route that we can get as quickly as possible.
Thank you for that intervention and the response. Of course, I know that these are important issues, and I'm not wanting to curtail the discussion. I am also mindful of the fact that we are operating within a tight schedule, and we want to conclude the meeting with definitive decisions as to how we proceed. So what I'd like to do is to ask the departments of health, education, the police, and the fire service to report by way of their readiness or any issues that you would like to raise, and then we'll come to the order round thereafter. And of course, we will follow the reports with some general recommendations that we would want to present for consideration. So can we invite health to come on now? Health, followed by education, the police, and the fire service. Okay, looks like the Department of Health is okay. All right, so we will improvise, have some redundancy. We'll invite the Deputy Permanent Secretary, who's at Command Center, to join us at the head table and to present an update in respect of the Department of Health. So just give us a second. DPS is coming to the head table. We'll be able to present an update on behalf of the Department of Health.
Okay, thank you. Good afternoon. Good afternoon. Thank you, CAPSEC. Protocol having been established. Protocol having been established, just to indicate that the Department of Health today conducted its internal disaster assessment, the group meeting, in order to determine the readiness of our ministry and our major health institutions to face the impending storm. We have determined that most of our institutions are ready and prepared, and we measured their preparedness by way of the availability of food supplies, fuel supplies, water supplies, medication, and the overall structural integrity of the buildings. So we have found that most of them are ready to face the impending storm. There are a couple of our institutions, and that includes the Respiratory Hospital and the Soufre Hospital, where sandbags may have to be used to mitigate against flooding if it comes to that. Structurally, we have most of our centers having been assessed with a few issues in terms of leaks, roof leakage, and so on, but these have been mitigated and will be mitigated against. All of them have 5-day supplies of food, water, and fuel at least. All of them have their medication available for the next 5 days. Our communication system is up and running and will be available for use during this period. And then when I say communication, I refer to our wireless communication. There is a slight issue with interconnectivity between the north and the south. This is due to the current location of the tower. However, we will look to improvise and to implement other measures to facilitate the communication between the hospitals in the north and those in the south. Generally speaking, we have measures in place for our staffing of those institutions in terms of ensuring that during the period of time we reduce our patient load as well, as much as possible, where possible, and to ensure that we have the requisite staff during the event as well as after the event to ensure that our patients are cared for. So generally speaking, I would say that we are in a state of readiness, and there are a few minimal issues that we will be addressing and ensuring that we don't have any heavy negative impact as a result of the passage of the storm. Thank you.
Thank you, DPS Health. So that is the update from the Department of Health. We will move now to the Department of Education. Okay.
Good afternoon, Captain. Dr. Myers then.
Okay, all right, so who would, we are allowing PS to proceed? Okay, PS, you may proceed, and Dr. Meyer will just elaborate or add any additional information.
Okay, thank you very much for that, CAPSEC. Good afternoon, colleagues, and good afternoon, Dr. Meyer, as well. I only wanted to touch on the fact that we know the consideration being given by NEMAC for the maybe closure of schools tomorrow. And for us, one of the concerns would be the impact that the passing storm would have on the regional exams that are being sat tomorrow, both at the Cape and the CXC level. And I just wanted to inform persons that we have reached out to CXC in terms of receiving guidance as to how this is going to be managed tomorrow. So we are waiting their feedback. And on other matters, I would just let Dr. Meyer continue from there. But I just needed to highlight the impact that this system would have on the exams being written tomorrow.
Thank you, PS Charles. I wish to recognize the Honorable Prime Minister, Honorable Alan Chasney, Leader of the Opposition, Honorable Philip J. Pierre, everyone at the head table, colleagues, good afternoon. Also in virtual land, good afternoon to you. PS has referenced the examinations. That's one of our major concerns, reference education. For tomorrow, we have our CSEC subjects. We have the English B, paper 1, paper 2 in the morning and paper 1 in the afternoon. That will impact 173 students. We've also got major Cape examinations. So we have Caribbean Studies, as well as Chemistry. Caribbean Studies, we have 217 students in the morning, and for Chemistry, we have 57 students. This is one of our major considerations, bearing in mind all of the instability that has been associated with the school year. And so we await the guidance of the Met Office, particularly reference the timing of the storm as to how feasible it would be, or is it just a general closure, because we note that the students would be impacted in that way. Reference our other educational institutions from early childhood through to higher education. These plans have always been in place. They've been reviewed. Our colleague, our health and safety officer, is on board in terms of that. So we do not have any major issues. If it speaks to closure of schools for tomorrow for all of the educational institutions, however, I reiterate, our major concern is with students who would have to sit those examinations. And even if there are alternative measures in place, when does that happen? And so this is consideration for the Met Office, and we will take the guidance of them as to the way forward. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Education. Of course, you've asked an important question that we will deal with, of course, as part of the recommendations for the meeting. I omitted the Department of Commerce before we bring in the police, and with us at Command Center is at the head table, we have the Permanent Secretary in the Ministry of Commerce. I will invite her now to give a brief update in terms of the status of that department in the report section.
Thank you, CAPSEC. In the interest of time, I wish to adopt the protocol already established and say good afternoon. Just to report briefly on two items, and one, that's the supply of bulk flour, rice, sugar. The government supply warehouse to the Ministry of Commerce is the sole importer/distributor of these commodities. And we do have an adequate supply on hand of rice, flour, and sugar. As it relates to of rice, sugar, that's brown and refined, we do have an adequate supply. But as it relates to flour, we are very low in terms of the stock of flour. Not to make anyone panic, we are rationing, and we are expecting on island but we are continuing to ration our supply of flour. So we have ensured that the wholesalers island-wide have sufficient to distribute. So whatever we have in the warehouse, we will continue to ration and reserve some for NEMO in the event that a request is made. With respect to trade facilitation, in the event officers are unable to report for duty, we have all the relevant members of staff are equipped to remotely facilitate trade facilitation as it relates to approvals of licenses, etc. So we can safely say that we are ready. We have been ready since COVID. COVID has forced us to ensure that we are always prepared. So the ministry is prepared for the storm. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. Commerce, we will now move to the Royal St. Lucia Police Force, followed by the St. Lucia Fire Services.
Thank you, Cabinet Secretary. My name is Wayne Chadri, Deputy Police Commissioner. I am standing in for the Commissioner of Police. I want to adopt the protocol that has been established in the interest of time. The Royal St. Lucia Police Force, we have planned and prepared accordingly in order for our various units and stations, departments, to respond adequately to the expected eventualities that will manifest itself from the advent of the tropical storm Elsa. We are prepared to respond after the storm has hit, pursuant to its impact and its effects. So consequently, there are a few mechanisms that we have put in place. Cancellation of leave would be a priority at this time, as well as prisoner management. Our core teams of the SSU and the Marine Unit have been mobilized to effect any search and rescue, whether it be by land or sea, if that happens. So overall, we've been prepared long before the hurricane season has started, and we have put our plans into effect as we speak from yesterday, and there are no challenges at this moment that we foresee that would prevent or deter us from responding adequately in support of all other agencies. Thank you.
Thank you, Deputy Commissioner. We now move to the St. Lucia Fire Services.
Good morning. I want to recognize the presence of the PM and other members of the head table. I am George Rickrin, Deputy Chief Fire Officer. From the fire department, we had a briefing this morning with our senior officers to discuss our preparations for the impending tropical storm Elsa. We have all our stations in a state of readiness. We have ensured contingencies in case we have to augment our staffing to ensure that we have adequate coverage and we can make a proper response. We have built up resiliencies in basically all our stations. So in case of interruption in the electricity supply, we have generators at all our stations. We have backup water supply. So we should be in a position to continue functioning for a good few days should we be severely impacted. But having said that, our main concern with our station remains that of fire service headquarters, because we are located right there on the Castries riverbank, and we know the city is a flood-prone area. And in the not-too-distant past, we've had to evacuate our stations because of severe flooding. So we have made arrangement contingencies to operate from an alternative site in case it comes to that. Also, we know there are some areas in St. Lucia that very
susceptible to flooding, such as Dennery and Slurry and even the city of Castries. So we have swift water rescue equipment that we have strategically located in case we have severe flooding in those areas, so we can make a quick and adequate response. All our equipment, our vehicles have been refueled and ready to go. And
Give me a little bit lead, because it's not that far.
we are quite prepared to respond. Of course, we might not be able to respond during the storm, but as soon as conditions permit, we should be able to provide the necessary emergency services. And of course, there was a program recently where the World Bank provided some drones for the fire department to assist in search and rescue, and even damage assessment after disaster. We've had a briefing with those drone operators this morning, so we are very much ready to move in case they're needed. So that is basically it in a nutshell for us, and we await any further development so we can know how to proceed accordingly.
Thank you, Officer Victorin. At this time, we will invite the St. Lucia and Seaports Authority, SLASPA, to present your update, and this would be followed by the Chamber of Commerce, and then we will have the utilities, which would include Lucilec, Wasco, Flow, and Digicel. But let's now invite SLASPA and then Chamber to present, followed by the utilities.
Good morning to all. This is SLASPA, St. Lucia and Seaports Authority, and we will accept the protocol already established. This is Nicola Myers, the Disaster Management Committee Chair for SLASPA. At this time, we had our own meeting yesterday across SLASPA, both air and seaport joint meeting, and we are prepared and ready to move forward with our response plans. Our main concerns at this time would be in regard to the flights. I should start with the seaports. For now, the seaports, we're expecting no vessel traffic tomorrow. However, we do have flights scheduled for both HIA and GFLC, United International Airport, and George F.L. Charles Airport tomorrow. Tomorrow, starting at George FLC, we have one flight at 9:15 a.m. and a second flight at 8 p.m. Liat has already cancelled its flight. We also, at HIA, we have about 8 flights due tomorrow, and starting from 12:30 p.m.
Friday,
just after. And among those flights, we also have transatlantic flights starting from 3:30 in the afternoon. We have 3 transatlantic flights, and our concern, as always, would be that there will be sufficient time to advise the carriers of whether they will be allowed to land on the day, and also we are required to have lead time also to do the assessments of the airstrips before any flights could land again. And we estimate that the lead time we need to give to the transatlantic flights, is about 13 hours, 8 hours of flight time, and 4 to 5 hours allowing for the check-in period due to COVID. So that is our main concern at this time, and we will advise the private sector that in regard to the high winds, etc., part of SLASPA's response plan will be to cut the stacks of the container park at the seaports. So this will affect the ability to deliver containers tomorrow morning, depending on what time is decided for shutdown. At this meeting, our stacks will be brought down because of the 40 knot winds that have been predicted by the Met Office, and they will have the yard will have to be rearranged the following day. So that will result in a delay for the delivery of containers tomorrow. Very likely will happen after midday. So that's the report from SLASPA, and we stand by for the meeting's assessment of when there will be a shutdown or if there is a shutdown. Thank you.
Thank you, SLASPA. We would speak a little more on the question of the airport operations, depending on what the final decision of the meeting is. So we will invite the representative from the Chamber of Commerce to do your present now, and we will thereafter hear from Lucia, WASCO, Flow, and Digicel in that order. And then we'll move into some of the recommendations that we have for consideration and for decisions to be made.
Mr. Chair, thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen. I really feel special. I would have thought that the critical utilities would have been invited to speak before the chamber on this important matter, because our preparation is at the phone level more than anything else. But having been called upon, I will go ahead to say that what we've tried to do in the last year is address the fundamental issue of disaster risk reduction and business continuity planning and business continuity in general. So we've held a number of workshops, and so what we are doing now is alerting our members. We had invited them last year to join the CAP, CAP, so that they could get alerts, and we will be sending them out a note to invite them to put in place their business continuity plans, be aware of the standard operating procedures in terms of the actions that should take place when a tropical storm warning and alert is given. And we are of the view from the chamber that not enough of our members, enough of the companies in general have BCPs and are operating them, but we are also satisfied that more have them now than before. On the same token, I want to say that we have worked quite a bit with the SLDB in getting people sensitive to climate change and climate adaptation and BCP. So that has been something we are working on, and we continue to work on, and we will be unfolding another series of preparedness, adaptation, disaster risk reduction, business risk and diagnostics in the upcoming months through one of our projects. A concern that we had, and we had not heard it addressed, was the work of the CCC and the city in general in unclogging drains and making sure that their pumps were in order and were operating for the upcoming wet season, because we think that will impact a wide cross-section of businesses in the city. So we would like to hear a little bit about that. We believe that if we are going to be moving into a heightened state of preparedness, a decision needs to be made this evening so that people are not leaving their homes unnecessarily early morning. We should not have them out and then try to get them back in. So we make that decision and that announcement in a timely fashion. That way we have a better chance of dealing with it. It is a bit late as far as SLASPA. I think we need to give SLASPA some leave. I don't think this afternoon is going to be a lost afternoon in terms of starting to clear your containers and putting your stacks in order. I think business people are already starting to do what they have to do. So I think SLASPA should move ahead, because if we're going to close down, I don't think they will be operating tomorrow morning. Our supplies committee have been, I think, giving out the information in terms of the supplies on island, and we will move to ensure that the stores and supplies committee will provide the information and let the NEMO be aware of what stock of goods and food they have on island at any point in time. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Luisi. So we would now invite the public utility companies or service providers, starting with Lucia, followed by Wasco, Flow, and Digicel.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. My name is Gilroy Puti, the Engineer for Select. In the interest of time, I'd like to adopt the protocol already established. The Select's overall readiness is very good. We assess our readiness prior to the hurricane season, and we look at many factors. The first factor that we look at is our infrastructure, our network, and our plans, and we have fairly robust inspection and maintenance program in place, and so there are no major issues, no vulnerabilities as it relates to our plant. We have one substation that is in a flood-prone area that has flooded. That's the one at Union that has flooded many times in the past, I think at least 3 times. We have put a system in place to automatically de-energize the substation once there is any signs of water, and that is to minimize any electrical damage that we have. It's easier to clean the substation if you have flooding, but if you have electrical damage on top of the water damage, it becomes a lot more challenging to restore supply. So that system has been tested and is functional. Some of the other areas that we look at are our tools and equipment and our vehicle fleet. All of that is in order. Our material supplies are generally adequate. There are some areas that are not at the levels that we would like because lead times have been a little longer than normal this time around, I guess because of COVID. But we generally have adequate supplies. We are expecting to get some orders next week. Our fuel supply on compound is at a level that would sustain us if we do get impacted, and our people are ready. We have reiterated to all involved their roles and responsibilities as it relates to any kind of weather impact. And our communication system is in order. We rely on the cellular network for now, but we do have a few satellite phones should that be down. So generally, Lucia's readiness is very good, and that we will test run on Sunday with a small disaster in the city where many of our poles were impacted, and I think we lost many transformers, 3 banks of transformers, and we were able to restore by the morning. So generally, I would say that our readiness is very good. Thank you.
Thank you, Lucia. We move to Wasco.
Hi, good afternoon. My name is Timothy James, Wasco representative. Sorry for the name you see Hunter, it's just I'm in somebody else's computer. Protocol established, just going to our level of preparedness. Our management team met yesterday to discuss the impending storm, and we are satisfied that all our systems are in place. We have chemical storage right around the island. Because of the level of rainfall we expect, especially in the rural parts, that our water turbidity will increase, so therefore we'll utilize more chemicals to be able to treat the water. We have already asked all our vehicles to be fueled up, to be ready for recovery efforts. If according to our impact tomorrow, all our fuel backup storage, transformers, generators are already fueled up. So basically, thankfully, the John Compton Dam was desilted, so we have access to both ports. So at least we don't have too much of a concern there. Our other intakes, we already have systems in place so in case they are silted up so that we can desil them so that we can restore the supply to our customers as soon as possible. We encourage customers to rainwater harvest so that at least we also have the storage facilities. At least if you have any impact, at least you have 3 days storage to be able to cater for any eventuality. But in large Wasco, we are ready and
are they willing to live with that? Are they willing to live with that? Will the international flights fly with that?
Thank you.
Yes.
Thank you very much, representative from Wasco. We invite the rep from Flow to be followed by Lucia. I'm sorry, to be followed by Digicel. My apologies.
Good afternoon, everybody. Adopting protocol already established. This is Amin Alexander representing Flow. Our BCP plan was kicked into high gear yesterday, and as of this moment, we are finalizing all our checks on at all our locations. Our bug tanks will be topped up at some point this afternoon, and all our vehicles and drivers have been instructed to fuel up the vehicles, and those that will be parking at our compounds to be parked on higher ground to mitigate any flooding which may occur. Our employee plans and our employee contact listing have all been updated and shared with our LCMT, and as of now we're expected to close off all of our preparedness plans by this afternoon, and our LCMT will meet just to finalize these activities, and we are basically in a state of readiness for the impending storm.
Thank you very much. So we move to Digicel.
Good afternoon to everybody. Colette McDonald representing Digicel, adopting the protocols which have been established. Just to give an update that we stand ready for the impending storm. Our CMC team had been activated from yesterday, and our various departments are closing off any checklists, any actions, just to ensure that everyone from our end is ready to give support to our customer base and to the nation in the event of any impact. Thank you.
All right, thank you very much. Very direct and to the point, much appreciated. Now, I do know that we have other sectors or other partners that would generally report, including our disaster committees and some others, but again, in the interest of time and recognizing that this meeting was convened with not much notice, at this stage, I would ask for your permission that we defer those reports unless we have any of those committee reps or any other agency that wish to flag an area of major concern or an issue at this time, because I think we want now to go into the recommendations that's before us so that a decision can be made and we can have adequate time for providing the notice to the public in terms of what our posture is going to be. So a few seconds, do we have any representative on the meeting from any of the agencies, including the disaster committees, that have any burning issue that you want to flag or to raise at this time? Not requesting for reports, unfortunately, would not be able to take all the reports, but certainly if you have an issue or burning question or point that you want to make, we'll give you an opportunity so to do at this time.
CAPSEC, I want to recognize Marwan Paul, David Paul, who has a comment or statement. Can you go ahead?
Yes, sure. Yes, proceed.
Okay, apparently he's muted or he has changed his mind.
Okay, well, if he's...
Hello?
Yes, go ahead, Mr. Paul.
Okay, yeah, my concern is more or less for the homeless people. I mean, in the city, the homeless people, we no longer have the town hall available, and I'm just wondering what would be done if the disaster do happen, what can be done, or what will be done in terms of housing or caring or moving, shifting, what can be done in terms of the homeless people.
Yes. Good question. I believe that we have the Department of Equity on the line, or we ought to. Would anyone from the Department of Equity wish to respond to that query? Okay, Mr. Paul, I'm afraid that we don't have someone from Equity with us at this time, but it's a legitimate concern.
But we normally do.
This would normally be matters under the Department of Equity, so we would ensure that your concern is addressed appropriately by the Department of Equity and the other associated agencies that would have jurisdiction in these matters. But thanks for that intervention. Okay, so ladies and gentlemen, I think we would have gotten a fair assessment as to this status of preparedness by the various agencies, and it appears that cumulatively at the national level we can see that the country is in a relatively good state of preparedness for facing the impending weather. So if I can just sum up very quickly in terms of what we have and present the recommendations as we have captured them. Essentially, we expect that the storm will likely be impacting St. Lucia during the hours of 6 a.m. to midday based on what the Met Office has actually given. Of course, these things, as we say, is not an exact science, and there can be some slight variation in that, but that's the impact period that we are looking at. A storm with intensity in terms of wind speed of 40 miles an hour, hence the reason why St. Lucia is under a tropical storm warning, with rainfall projections of 3 to 6 inches. And so based on that, and taking into consideration our standard protocol and the discussions to date, I think it is clear that there will be first a recommendation that we activate our national response by invoking a national shutdown tomorrow morning during the hours of 6 a.m. and 12 midday.
Can I make a suggestion? Given that the curfew ends at 4, why don't we just start it from 4? Because you're really saying that the reason for the 4 is for your farmers and your fisher folk to be able to go out.
Yes.
And if we're not recommending that they go out, why don't we just, start it from 4 instead of from 6?
So yes, we can adjust that recommendation. So the national shutdown, therefore, is being proposed to be from 4 a.m. To 12 noon, which will be the period for the national shutdown.
Sure.
Mr. Joy, I see you're looking in our direction.
Yes, like you said about the, it's not written in stone.
No.
Yeah, the hours. So the 12.
It would be as of now.
No. It's from 4 a.m. to 12 noon.
Yes.
Yeah. So you should at least give some leeway in the event, because you're going to have cloudiness and showers lingering.
That's okay.
Yeah, but the winds would have passed through.
Yes, so essentially, Mr. Joy, this recommendation, of course, would be subject to the advice of Met. We're talking of the period of the national shutdown, during which time there will be no operation save for essential services that will be operating. I am sensing that you are of the view that we should consider a period slightly later than 12 noon?
Yes.
And if that's the recommendation, I mean, you are certainly free to do so, because I'm capturing it based on our understanding of what's happening, so that we can make a decision in consultation with all. Now, there will be thereafter the normal damage assessment period that would have to be done before the all clear is given. This does not suggest an all clear after midday. This is just the period of the national shutdown.
All right, understood.
Yes?
Yeah.
So,
I'm in agreement.
so we are okay. Yeah. So the director of Met is essentially accepting the recommendation of a national shutdown during the hours of 4 a.m. to 12 noon tomorrow. The second recommendation, or related to this, will be that the period for damage assessment will follow thereafter, and in the circumstance, with particular reference to airport operations, we want to recommend that we look at an expedited period for damage assessment, so that we can make a decision on the question of the reopening of the airports. It is therefore being proposed that we do the damage assessment during the period immediately following the national shutdown up to about 2 o'clock, giving ourselves at least a minimum of 2 hours to be able to do the preliminary urgent damage assessment, particularly in terms of our infrastructure, road infrastructure, the airports, to determine whether in fact the next recommendation, which will be the reopening of our airports. So first of all, the airports would be closed during the national shutdown in the morning hours, but then and that would be subject to SLASPA's intervention, that the airports would reopen at 2 p.m. subject to the outcome of that assessment. So if the damage assessment gives the all clear that the projected time and what would be communicated for the reopening of the airports will be from 2 p.m. In respect of the public service, we are also recommending that the public service would remain closed save for the essential aspects of operation in the public service, which will continue to operate once the all clear has been given. In the closure of the public service during the national shutdown, it is expected that as much as possible, to the extent possible, that virtual services can be provided. Fortunately, we've had the experience of COVID and have capabilities in terms of providing virtual services to the extent possible, depending, of course, on the impact of the storm. In respect of the private sector, a recommendation is, and that would be subject for the intervention of the private sector, that consideration can be given to a recommencement of or a delayed operation in the private sector following the all clear after 2 p.m. for continuation of services. For example, your gas stations, your supermarkets, and so on. But again, that we would await feedback from the private sector in respect of that recommendation. So these are generally the recommendations coming out of the meeting. I don't know if I've missed anything. We can then open up for comments, for feedback, and so that we can make a final decision. Mr. Luisi, can I invite you and or the reps from the private sector perhaps to respond initially? And I also would like to hear from the SLASPA officials in respect of the airport operations as well.
Mr. Chairman, I asked for a few minutes. Let me just conclude some consultations and I will react thereafter. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Any feedback from SLASPA in respect of the lead time that you require, your no time, and of course consultation notification to your stakeholders, particularly taking into consideration your transatlantic flights?
Good afternoon, CAPSEC, SASPA would request time to confer with Air Traffic Services as to whether this, the amount of the scheduled time that you've given us is sufficient to do the assessment and be able to issue the NOTAM in time.
Yes. So in saying this both to SLASPA and to the private sector, there is of course the alternative consideration, which would essentially be the national shutdown for the entire day. We understand the implication associated with that, both for the private sector and particularly for the air and seaports operation. And hence that's why it is being recommended that we preemptively do the national shutdown from 4 a.m. to 12 noon, but that we allow for a reasonable period for an expedited damage assessment, but with the notification that the airports, air and seaports would be expected to open at the time that has been proposed. But we will be guided by your advice and consultation in the matter. Dr. Meyer, I see, yes, you would like to make an intervention?
A quick question to you, Chair, and through you, Chair, to Director of Med Services. Because our 2 sets of examinations that we have start at 1 p.m. We would have had 4 examinations tomorrow. We understand that 2 would definitely be cancelled, but I would need to get the way forward in terms of the 1 p.m. because it speaks to ensuring that our students are aware, that the parents are aware. At what point could I possibly give the all clear, or is it a definite no that it is not possible? So we want to have clarification on the way forward for our students.
Okay. First of all, I had a question for you also. With CXCs, its original body. Yeah. St. Lucia is not the only island that will be impacted, so it would be a group of islands that...
It's Barbados, I mean you.
Yes, St. Vincent and Grenada. Yes. So I figure it would have been a collective agreement that on Friday you would not have exams.
Yes, we have CXC. St. Vincent is slightly different because of the issues that they've had. So there were contingencies put in place for St. Vincent.
For St. Vincent.
I'm still not sure exactly if it's going to impact it.
Yeah.
The point is that those other islands may be impacted. I do not know the level. The Madam Registrar, I've just been on the message with her. They have written to CXC. PS is very much aware, our leadership is very much aware. But at the moment, we do not have a definite from CXC.
Yeah.
Nevertheless, those examinations would have been scheduled. So if it is that based on the national plan, no exams can happen, then we take that information to CXC for the plan B, so to speak.
Okay.
But if it is that the afternoon can continue, then we would have only 2 exams that our students are impacted by that would need to be taken into consideration.
Yes.
So we just want to ensure that leaving here, we're quite clear as to the way forward and what the recommendations are.
Yes. If I can bring some clarity to this by way of the timeline so that we can look at the scheduling. So we know for sure, as of now, the recommendation on the table, which is likely to be approved, is that we will have a national shutdown from 4 a.m. to 12 noon. We also know that there would need to be a period for the damage assessment before the all clear is given. We have set that period to be from 12 noon to 2 p.m. So it would mean that we would not, from a scheduling standpoint, be able to do anything before 2 o'clock, because the all clear would not be given. Now, if it is possible from an operational standpoint, subject to the all clear being given, that there can be activities after 2 p.m., we would say by all means, but certainly we would not be able to give endorsement for any activity during that period, which would essentially be from 4 a.m. to 2 p.m. So I think just putting it in perspective. So we would need to give the all clear before we can in fact begin to have scheduled activities and scheduled operations.
Well, the conclusion therefore is that all examinations are cancelled for tomorrow.
Yes. Okay.
Yes.
Okay. I trust that the meeting, because we may not have all been on board, but that was some clarification being sought for by the Ministry of Agriculture, by the Ministry of Education. I'm sorry. So essentially, take into consideration that the recommendation is for there to be the national shutdown from 4 a.m. to 12 noon. There would have to be a period given for the assessment before the all clear is given. We are projecting in the best case scenario that we may be able to give the all clear by 2 p.m. That is only a projection because, in fact, depending on the assessment, if the all clear cannot be given or has to be adjusted in terms of sectors, areas, location, that will all come. So in terms of the scheduling of activities, reopening of businesses, reopening of operation, those things would have to be taken into consideration. So we open up the floor for those who are joining us virtually. If there are any inputs and recommendations. I also need to announce that our Prime Minister had to leave the meeting because of another urgent schedule matter, but of course he has given the go-ahead for us to be able to confirm the decision, or not confirm, but rather to finalize the decision subject to his confirmation, so that the a formal notification and announcement would be given immediately following this meeting.
Okay, can we have fire service first and then Mr. Luisi afterwards?
Sure, we recognize as per your request.
Yes, Cabinet Sec, Judge Victorian, Deputy Fire Chief. From a safety perspective, or even security, I suppose that police may have some issues with this as well. We are announcing a specific time, well, I don't know so specific, but a tentative 12 p.m. time to end the shutdown. I know traditionally we've had a time for shutdown in terms of the starting time, but I'm not sure we've had an end time, because usually it is the end time of the shutdown is after the all clear has been given. But given the damage we may expect from the storm, there is no telling how long we may need to keep persons in so that we can put security measures in place, safety measures in place, before we can announce the all clear. So I think, well, in the past, the all clear has always been given to end the shutdown rather than having a preemptive time.
I take your point, Officer Victorin, you are absolutely correct. But from a planning standpoint, we are making certain projections. Remember, and I agree with you, that setting a period for the damage assessment and projecting a time by which the all clear will be given is only a planning proposal, so that our officials will, without compromising anything and being concerned about safety and all of the protocols, that will the final decision as to when the all clear will be given would be subject to the outcome of the assessment. We were simply talking about a period of time from a planning standpoint, but you're correct, not until the all clear is given that the shutdown ends. But we're just compartmentalizing it in terms of the period for the various activities. But you're absolutely correct that it is when the all clear is given. And for example, the all clear potentially can be given before 2 o'clock. Again, it will be when it is given that we move. But from a planning and scheduling standpoint, we were advising the meeting that as much as possible, there should be no schedule or planned activity, at least not before 2 p.m. So I think that was the guidance we were given. But I appreciate that you've put it in perspective that it is only after the all clear is given then the shutdown would have ended.
Mr. Luisi?
Thank you very much. The recommendation is acceptable to the Chamber of Commerce, and we understand it that the shutdown is until 2 o'clock or 12 noon?
Well, let's just qualify this a little, Mr. Luisi. Based on the intervention from the fire service, the shutdown begins from 4 a.m. until the all clear is given. We are projecting from a planning standpoint that, and based on the information from Met, the projection is that we will be under the impact of the storm from its start at approximately 6 a.m. until 12 noon. And on that basis, we are projecting that we would need some time after 12 noon for the damage assessment and the all clear to be given. So in direct, well, if I am to put it correctly and directly, that the national shutdown will commence at 4 a.m. until the all clear is given. We are projecting that the all clear potentially can be given by 2 p.m.
Okay, thank you. I wanted to clarify that, and I appreciate that, and that is how we interpreted it. But I wish to alert that because of the nature of business, to mobilize, to reopen, may take as much as 2 to 3 hours, certain businesses, and therefore not all businesses will choose to reopen. And I want people to be aware that those that normally operate outside of a 4:30 normal end of working day may choose to open, like supermarkets and what have you. But as it has been recommended and clarified, it is acceptable to the Chamber of Commerce. Again, but one point which has not been dealt with was the whole issue of the city of Castries as a preventative measure. Has work been done to clear the drains to minimize and avert flooding that sometimes occurs, and other city pumps working so that could help in the event of excessive rainfall? But thank you very much, Captain.
Thank you. I would invite the appropriate representatives to respond to your query on the preparedness of the city. I guess that would be a combination of infrastructure and the Castries City Council.
Yeah, I can come in here, Captain.
Yes.
I got a personal view of the pumps in operation when I drove past. Recently, we've been carrying out the maintenance of the pump and keeping focus on it from our mechanical engineer. Chief engineer is on the call. He may add a little more to this, but we have been maintaining both pumps as best as possible. So they are functional. I think there are other challenges within the city with regards to the connected drains. But as far as we are aware, the pumps are functional.
Thank you very much for that. And just one more point, CAPSEC. Is there any benefit for us to delay the making of any pronouncement until the 5 p.m. report comes in that may show something more or less drastic? I'm talking about if there's anything that changes our perspective coming out at 5 p.m. because it may be, we may want to give ourselves that leeway. Just a thought. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Luisi, for that intervention. I would let Mr. Joy respond to this. I think it's a very pertinent observation in terms of the timing of our public pronouncement of the plans that we are actually agreeing on.
You've brought up a very good point. In the event that the system disintegrates, then we wouldn't need the shutdown. So I agree that we could have a contingency plan in place where we might not need to have the shutdown. Because it's a forecast that we're given, and there's a certain percentage of it happening. So based on our models, we're saying that this could most likely happen, but it's not definite.
So essentially, which supports the recommendation that Mr. Luisi is making. We are agreeing, and of course, as I said, because the Prime Minister had to leave, we will be requiring his final endorsement of the plans and what is agreed to. But I think Mr. Luisi's intervention is one of the timing of the public announcement, which I think is fine, and that's within our control. In fact, it would allow us to have more up-to-date and accurate information from the Met Office that allow for any adjustment, but more importantly for communication as to the protocols and the national plan that we would be activating. So save for one thing though, given that we are talking about a national shutdown, I think it would be important, particularly for those both businesses and operations in the public and private sector, if they are aware prior to their own closure today what the posture for tomorrow would be, because we would not want people perhaps leaving office or leaving work by 4 o'clock expecting to be back tomorrow morning and in fact to announce the national shutdown. So that's the only concern that I have. You would want, by the time people are closing their business, whether at 4 and onwards, to do so with the knowledge as to what happens in the morning. So that's the only concern, Mr. Luisi, but I think there is value to the suggestion of being guided by the at least up to the 5 p.m. weather advisory as to whether in fact there is need for any adjustment in our plans.
Well, I was updated by my forecaster, Ms. Shalry, and if need be, she could furnish a report right now.
No, I think it's not so much for the meeting, but it is more in terms of the public announcement. Can I conclude by saying to the meeting, I think the intervention here by Mr. Luisi is a good one. So working with the Met Office and with NEMO and with the GIS, Office of the Prime Minister in terms of announcement, we will take these things into consideration and see how best that the public announcement will be managed in such a way to address all of the issues that we have actually identified. Is that?
Mr. Chair, I wasn't intending to hold it back. I just thought that if it got worse, we may wish to react. If it got better, we may want to have the flexibility to adjust.
Yes.
But I have full confidence that the Met Office will give the best advice as soon as it is able to give that advice when it gets information. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. We would like to again just open up if there are any comments, queries, clarification based on what we have discussed so far. We'll provide an opportunity so to do before I seek to sum up on what the conclusion is or what the recommendation of this meeting is in terms of our procedure or the protocols that we would adopt going forward. So just before you come on, if you are coming on virtually, we have the Chief Education Officer, Dr. Meyer, who would make an intervention at this time.
CAPSEC, I deal with children, I deal with young people, families. So for me, it's very important to have clarification moving forward.
Okay. All right, we're getting the chief to come up to the microphone so that everyone can hear.
Yes, thank you, CAPSEC. As I was saying, it is very important to me and through the Office of the Chief Education Officer for the leadership of education, supported by the Honorable Minister, that we're quite clear as to what we're saying to families. I come back to the point of the CXC examinations. We know the anxiety attached to it. So I was asking the head table for further clarification as to when we can look to an announcement that is a definite, so that that can be communicated to the general public. Is it that we're going to wait for a 5 p.m. announcement? Will it be tomorrow morning, so that that information is clearly articulated to ensure that we are all in the know and there is confirmation? And by whom will it be made? Thank you very much.
Yes. Okay, good question. So if I may, my understanding of where we are now is that there will be a national shutdown tomorrow from 4 a.m. until the all clear is given, and we are projecting, just projecting based on the reports from Met, that we should be in a position to give the all clear somewhere in the range of 2 p.m. That's only a projection. So from an education announcement standpoint, or as a matter of fact, from a standpoint of any sector, I think we can begin to communicate that there will in fact be a national shutdown tomorrow. The period of that shutdown may change, as Mr. Luisi had indicated, based on our 5 p.m., whether it is for a longer period, for a shorter period. But I think now we can say, and that is subject, of course, to the final approval of the Prime Minister, this meeting is agreeing based on the assessment of the Met report, the assessment of the situation, that we will activate a national shutdown tomorrow from 4 a.m. until at least 2 p.m. or at least when the all clear is given. So I think we can safely say that that has been agreed and there is consensus on this. That allows for the various agencies, education and others, to communicate with your stakeholders. The official announcement will also be made in through the appropriate ways, through NEMO and the other agencies. But we can in fact say that has been the consensus of the meeting. That of course is just awaiting the ratification from the Prime Minister, but from all indications, as he left the meeting, did indicate the endorsement to go with that recommendation. Okay, any...
CAPSEC, with your permission.
Yes.
We have 3 people who've had their hand up for a while. In that order, Miss, if your permission again, please. Miss Avalon Shalry, Miss Carol Mangal, and Miss Anja Baptiste.
Yes, you may proceed. Thank you, Deputy Director, for that intervention. And of course, just for your information, the coordination or hosting is being done at NEMO, and therefore we do not have the benefit of actually seeing the interventions or the request for interventions being made. But Ms. Shalry, you may proceed, followed by the other 2 persons indicated by Ms. Mira.
Hi, good day, everybody. I am Avalon Shalry, the forecaster on duty. I am not sure if the seas, forecasted seas were indicated. I think when I came on, I may have missed part of the presentation. Especially for SLASPA and the Ministry of Agriculture, we are forecasting that from tomorrow, well, right now, the forecast is for locally rough seas, that's waves of 8 feet, that's 2.4 meters, but based on the forecast, we're looking at seas of at least 16 feet, so that would be very rough, about 4.9 meters, and so we need persons who have marine interest to be aware and be cautious.
Thank you very much for that intervention. I'm sure that the requisite agencies would have taken note and would be able to communicate with their stakeholders accordingly. The next person can proceed. Unfortunately, I don't have the benefit of seeing who you are, but you can proceed with your query.
Thank you, CAPSEC. Thank you, Ms. Beda. CAPSEC, Carol Mangal, President Bankers Association of St. Lucia. We know the concern right now is access to cash for many, and we want to assure the public that our ABMs have been replenished and all our banks will top them up again prior to close of business today. And also our night deposit shoots are available for business persons to secure their cash takings once the weather permit them to. We want to say that based on the time frame that has been given, as you know, we close at 2. So we want to manage expectations and advise that if this is the time frame that we are operating with, then that means that we would not be opening tomorrow as banks. So we want everybody to know that upfront so that there is no misunderstanding, because we will not be able to mobilize and open after 2 o'clock. Thank you.
Thank you for that clarification and intervention. In fact, I want to just follow up on this on the basis of an observation or intervention made by Mr. Luisi earlier, and would want to encourage as much as possible, both in the public and private sector, that individual sectors, individual businesses or agencies would need to put out your own announcement as it relates to the protocol that you would adopt. So for example, like the Bankers Association or the banking sector will put something out to the public indicating that save for your ATMs and other services that you can provide, that in-person or banking operations would not be available. The same way in the private sector, in terms of any reopening of services when the all clear is given, Mr. Luisi, I think we recognize that it will be left to the individual business operations or the individual sector operators to determine whether in fact it is feasible and practical for them to do an afternoon operation. So again, we would invite and encourage those individual businesses and sectors, preferably at the sector level or the association level, to be able to put out public statements for the information of the public in that regard, beyond what NEMO and the other agencies will put out by way of general information. But thank you for that intervention. Can we take the next person?
Good afternoon all. Thank you, CAPSEC. My name is Angela Batiste, USAID BHA rep. I'm not sure if we've mentioned sufficiently. One of the areas I'm thinking that we need to give some consideration to is the issue of sheltering in the event persons' homes are severely or seriously impacted and they require alternative accommodation. What is the level of readiness and availability of shelters in a COVID-19 environment? You hear me?
Yes, Mr. Batiste, we heard you loud and clear. We have put out a draft list of shelters for 2021. Just to inform, the one for 2020 was done late last year, and we just revised our 2021 list, and the draft list is on our Facebook page and our website. We have protocols in place, taking into consideration COVID-19 that was approved last year for shelters. We've done extensive training with our shelter managers and persons responsible for shelters around the island. As we speak, meetings are being held. We had a meeting this morning with the Shelters Committee, chaired by Mr. Bernes Kodra, who was sitting in for the Chief Education Officer, who is the chair of the Shelters Committee. So measures have been put in place for shelters around the island. All of our district disaster committees have put in place their list of shelters, and their numbers have been put up on our website, so persons can call them, reach out to them if they need to clarify anything concerning shelters in the area. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. Do we have any other interventions, any other questions, query, clarification? Because I think we have perhaps almost exhausted our time, and we ourselves here at command or head office or command center would need also to be vacating our location for another activity very soon. So we're about to see if we can sum up. Any input, queries, clarification that's needed, we will provide an opportunity to do so now before we conclude.
CAPSEC, with your permission, just a clarification from SLASPA in regard to the airports. Quite apart from the end of the shutdown, and when the all clear is will be given, SLASPA will make an assessment of the airports and will indicate when the airports will reopen as a matter of safety. This is separate from when the all clear is given.
Okay, so if I'm to understand you, that SLASPA would be working within the framework of the national shutdown protocol, but will make its assessment and communicate to your stakeholders the operational times beyond the all clear that you will be open. Is that correct?
That is correct.
Okay, all right, fine.
Thank you.
Great. Thank you for that clarification. So if I may sum up at this time, and I am looking at the screen to ensure that there is no other person with any burning intervention. Okay, there's a hand up. Let's allow the person.
Mr. Jermaine Hunt.
Okay, we'll allow Mr. Hunt to come in very quickly.
Good day, all. Jermaine Hunt, Senator Cooperative Credit Union League. As my colleague would have said, Ms. Mangal, based on our operating hours, I mean the credit unions, from 4 to 2, if that would be the decision that would be made for a national shutdown, it wouldn't allow us to open thereafter. You mean to get staff to come into the branch, and most credit unions would be closed at 3 o'clock. So if the decision here would be a national shutdown from 4 to 2, we too would not be able to open thereafter. I thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Hunt, for that clarification and intervention. So by way of summing up, if I may, the meeting has agreed that based on the advice from the Met Office and taking into consideration all of the information on the pending storm, that we will activate a national shutdown of the country commencing from 4 a.m. tomorrow morning until the all clear is given. So I want to repeat that the national shutdown will be from 4 a.m. until the all clear is given. We are, however, based again on the advice of Met, projecting that the all clear could potentially be given somewhere about 2 o'clock, but it will only be after the all clear is given that the shutdown is going to be discontinued. So rather than speaking specifically to the hours of the shutdown, we will announce the commencement of the shutdown on being 4 a.m. until the all clear is given. From a planning perspective and with the agencies with various responsibilities, we are projecting that it may be possible for that to be lifted somewhere about 2 p.m. But it will be when the all clear is given that the national shutdown will be ended. We've also agreed that in respect of operations both in the public and private sector, in the public sector, the essential services may be resumed when the all clear is given. And of course, we are not talking about the essential services that operate 24/7, like our police, hospitals, and so on, that will continue right through. The national shutdown would not impact that. But of course, the planning and operational logistics will take into consideration that there is a national shutdown. But both in the public and private sector, any resumption of normal business activities will be determined after the all clear is given in terms of what is feasible, and appropriate announcements will be made. In terms of airport operations, the Air and Seaports SLASPA, Air and Seaports Authority, will communicate to their interests, both air and seaports interests, maritime and civil aviation interests, the times of operations of our air and seaports once the all clear is actually given. I think that in summary is what has been agreed. We will of course continue to be guided by the advice from the Met Office, and as always, NEMO will be the official source through which all national information on the emergency and our response will be communicated. So let me at this time take this opportunity to thank all officials, all agencies on this meeting for your participation, your input, and we would want to ask that we start to activate the implementation of the plans that we have spoken about. And of course, let's continue to pray as we have been doing, that the good Lord is going to intervene and provide protection for our people and for our country at this time, and let us all remain safe so that we can weather through this impending weather. With this, I want to thank particularly the Met Office and your team, Mr. Joye, your team that would be on throughout, and I want to thank NEMO and all of the agencies, particularly those who are on the front line and would be expected to be working right through the period of impact of the storm. We thank you on behalf of the people of St. Lucia for your dedicated service, and I pray that all will go well. Thank you, and good afternoon to everyone.
Thank you, Capsec. Good day.
Thank you.